There we go. I trust you can hear me now. Hello everybody, I'm Paul Ducklin from Sophos Naked Security, back for another week's Naked Security live talk. As you can see, today's topic is the surprisingly irrelevant right now, how to make your homeschooling more secure. So before I start, let me just say that the content that I'm going to present is all available in a fantastic article that we published this week on Naked Security. So I'm just going through this to give you an idea of what to think about and how to think about it while you read the article. So please go and have a look at the article once the video is over, and that's what you want to look for. Trying to get the contrast right. So look for that picture when you get to... It's not coming out very clearly. So that's what you want to look for. It's an article that explains all the stuff that you need to know. So that's what to look for. Homeschooling, how to stay secure. Let's start at the beginning. I've got quite complicated notes today because there's quite a lot to go through. So let's kick off straight away. The first thing, by the way, this advice, it doesn't just apply if you have kids, or even if you don't have children, or you don't have children who are of school-going age at the moment. These are things that you can do for yourself and your family anyway, particularly if you're in lockdown and you're relying on the internet perhaps more than usual. These are great tips that you can do to think about your own online safety, your own online security, and how you manage your network. Of course, if you have kids at school, then there are extra pressures from outside to do stuff that the school requires you to do because your children can't go to the school. So, there may be things you're forced to do which make some of the privacy and the security setting choices that you make a little bit more difficult. And it's ironic that the word homeschooling itself almost stands as a metaphor for how there's no one right answer that's going to suit everybody. Because you think about that word homeschooling, do you write it as one word? That's perfectly correct. Like backpack, or do you write it as two words, homeschooling, like butter knife? That's also correct. Or you could even put a hyphen in there, in the same way that you might put half-baked. So unfortunately, there are no magic solutions here that I can go, these are the check boxes, these are the options, these are the things that you pick. And of course, what you choose depends on the applications that the school might require you to use. It depends on the operating system that you have, if you've got a laptop, if you've got a tablet, or if you've got a phone, whether your children have their own devices that they can share or whether they need to use one of yours. So unfortunately, there's no one size fits all, but I hope I can get you to think about these problems in a way that works well for everybody. So the first thing that you need to do, particularly if you haven't had to do homeschooling before and now you're absolutely stuck at home, particularly a problem in the UK, kind of feels like schools aren't going to open again probably until Easter at the earliest. So we have to get this right, and we might as well get it right now. The first thing is decide how you're going to deal with device sharing, because there are probably comparatively few families where every person in the family is going to have a device that they can use exclusively. So you may have children may need to share a device that you also need to use, or siblings may need to share devices with different apps, and and they may be at different learning levels. They may need different levels of access to the internet because of their age and so forth. So the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you set up separate accounts for everyone in your family who's going to share the device. If you've been in the habit in the past, you just give your iPhone to your kids when they're very young and they learn how to play a game and it keeps them quiet for a while, or you set them up watching YouTube. We all know the horror stories of people going, oh, I lent my iPhone to my 2-year-old daughter and she sent a tweet from my account by mistake. Kids learn pretty fast how to copy what you do, and the reason for having separate accounts is it protects you from each other, even if you all trust each other, even if you're all looking out for each other. It means that one person can't access the files from somebody else's account by mistake. And today's operating systems and phones allow you to do this sort of divide and conquer, if you like. So if you're going, no, I won't bother with that, it's too much hassle, think again. because the other thing that you can do if you set up separate accounts with most operating systems, it means that when you engage the parental controls on that device, you can do it usually separately per account. So it means if you need to let your children use your laptop, you don't have to have the parental controls in place on your account, which might get in the way of you doing your work, but you can be and if you have a young kid and an older kid, you can actually set things differently for each account. So divide and conquer is really important because it prevents, in particular, it protects you and your family from someone making a completely innocent but otherwise dangerous mistake. The second thing that you need to think about, which is the reason this is point 2, it's very greatly simplified if you've done number 1, set up separate accounts for everyone in the family, is deciding which are the appropriate websites for each person who's going to be using the device. So for the parents, you might not need or want any blocking. You might have stuff that you can't block because you need to access it for work. But for your kids, you need to decide what websites is it appropriate for them to access. And remember, it's better to block and have them come and explain why they need access to a site rather than let them wander where they shouldn't be. And remember that no matter what technology you've got in place, whether you've got a web filtering, security, antivirus, and the parental controls that say, oh, the kids can go to these educational sites, the older kids can go to specific school sites, educational sites, and Wikipedia and a whole load of other research-oriented sites, for example, be prepared to supervise and be prepared to intervene if you see that your children are getting somewhere that's unnerving them or where they certainly shouldn't be. And if you have separate accounts set up for each person in the family, then configuring parental controls separately for each account allows you to share the device between children of different ages much more readily. And by the way, just as it happens, if you're a Mac family, you have a Mac in the family, we have an article that we published. Whoa! If I hadn't dropped my phone, it would have gone much better. It survived. It's funny if you do that when it's really vital, the phone will smash, but mine survived. So there it is. I hope you can read the headline, Setting Up a Mac for Young Children, and it gives you some advice. Some of the Mac screens can be quite daunting. There are a lot of them, but with that power, with all the options, comes quite a lot of stuff that you can do for your kids. So that's item 2 of 7. Okay, so once you've decided which sites are appropriate, and there may be some that the school require you to add to the list, either because they're portal sites where kids will do things like upload homework or download questions or whatever, or take quizzes or whatever it is, and there may be sites that the school specifically ask you to use because they may have an account with that site that is actually part of the learning program, and there may be sites that at particular times and for particular subjects that are particularly useful or necessary to help the kids, that the school thinks will help the kids learn whatever topic it is most effectively. So be prepared to adjust the sites that they can go to suit the needs of the curriculum or the teachers, or just how your kids are getting along. So the third of 7 is, of course, you need to choose which are the right apps for your children to use. It's not just saying, oh well, we can do it all with a browser and there are a few sites. You may find, particularly with some of the apps that you use, you may find that some of them are kind of foisted on you because the school may say, oh, you need to use this sort of account. We've got this particular app, that goes on a phone or a tablet. However, particularly if you're adding apps that you think your children need for educational purposes on your phone, please stick to the official app store for whatever device you've got. With Apple, of course, you have no choice. You have to shop at the Apple App Store. With Google, with Android phones, you get a bit more choice. You can loosen it up to allow apps to install apps from anywhere if you like. Now, neither the Apple App Store nor Google Play is 100% guaranteed to be free of malware, whatever Apple or Google might tell you. But at least they get some oversight, and at least apps that are found to be bad after they've been snuck in by some devious crooks can actually get blocklisted, and you can be warned about it. So there's no legalistic reason why you shouldn't shop off market, as you might call it, on Google phones. And there's no reason that just sticking to Google Play alone will keep you 100% virus or malware free, but like I said, there is curation by both Apple and Google. They do make some efforts, and unfortunately with many of the what you might call the off-market app stores, some of them, they're kind of meant to be app stores where anybody can publish anything, kind of unregulated, and often that means they attract the app vendors who can't get into say the Google Play Store because they won't play by the rules and their apps aren't suitable for use. Once again, learn what operating system controls exist for apps these days. In that Mac article, for example, we show you how you can configure individual apps on the Mac for your children to use. In the homeschooling article on Naked Security, we give you how to find Microsoft's guide for sort of controlling what your children do with apps on the device. You know, most importantly, remember that these days on both iPhone and on Android, for individual apps, and it's different depending on which operating system you've got and which version, but these days, for individual apps, you can actually go and decide what permissions you want to change even after you've installed the app. So you can actually say, well, I want to use this app, but it does have a video calling feature, but I'm going to disable access to the camera. And most well-written apps, if they do have, say, a video feature, but you don't want it to be enabled, and you turn off the camera for that app, the app can't turn it back on, but all the other parts of the app will still work. So you need to go and learn how that works, experience that for yourself. By the way, it's very useful in your own digital life for allowing you to use apps and say, you know, I don't think that app really needs access to my photos, or I don't want to give that app access to my microphone because I don't plan on using the voice features. So it helps you actually limit your own exposure as well. The fourth thing you need to do, of course, and this is hard enough for big people, it feels like it should be even harder for children, and that is advice that we give all the time: pick proper passwords. Now, it may feel like, oh God, I can't handle passwords myself, so I've just used a password manager, but it was hard to learn. I don't fancy trying to teach my kids how to use a password manager. Remember that young kids actually learn new stuff pretty easily. If you live in a bilingual household, for example, or if you're friends with a family who have kids at the same age of you and they're bilingual, you'll be astonished how easily children can learn two languages, much more easily than adults can. And it's exactly the same with getting them used to the idea of how they create inventive passwords and then memorize perhaps phrases or jingles. So depending on the age of the kids, there's a great little table that we've got in the article on Naked Security that tells you how you can sort of introduce the idea of passwords to your children, because whether you think passwords are a good idea or not, they're almost certainly going to have their own passwords, and you might as well get them in the habit as young as you can to picking proper passwords and avoiding picking stuff that their friends and other people might easily guess. The other lesson, or the other talk that you have to have with your children, is to impress upon them that passwords are not for sharing. Not with anybody, not with the teacher, not with the police, not with anybody. They're designed for you and you alone, and you're not to give them away, not to anybody. And it's important to reinforce that it is something that's private, and that's why they get to choose it for themselves, because it means they can pick something that other people can't guess. And we've got some tips on how, as your kids get older, you can actually get them to create reasonably complicated passwords, without making them too hard to remember, using jingles and aid memoirs or passphrases, stuff like that. So there's a great little table on there that will help you to do that. However, there's a rather annoying side of passwords for homeschooling, certainly that I've been aware of. A reader from Naked Security contacted us about this relating to the UK. And this is something that this is not your fault or your kid's fault, but this is something, please, if you work in a school, if you're setting up accounts for a school for homeschooling, please listen carefully now. We had a case, this reader reported that they had a case in the school where some kids got some messages from their friends' accounts, but the messages weren't typed in by their friends. They were typed in by someone else. Now, I don't know whether it was one of the other kids in the class being naughty, or whether it was someone outside had figured it out. And we strongly, as far as we can see, the reason this happened is at least for this class in this particular school, they were required to use a certain online account. The school set up the accounts for the kids, which is great of them, but they set every single child's password to the same default value. Every kid in the class had the same password, so they could just go to one of their friends' accounts and their password would work. Very bad idea. So whatever passwords that you get given, if there is one set up, go and change it. Because the problem with passwords that are set by other people and then given to you is A, they could have picked the same password for everyone, which is an appalling idea, don't do it. And B, you have no idea who has access to that original list of passwords. For all you know, it could be sitting in an Excel file on somebody's laptop that isn't properly secured somewhere else. So changing passwords from the defaults is very, very important. So we're 4 through, 3 to go. The fifth tip, and this works, we've been saying this to businesses for ages, businesses are learning to do it. Many home users are getting this right because a lot of operating systems and software can do it automatically, but that is patching and securing the systems that your children are going to use. So don't go, oh, well, I'll do it's all working nicely on the Android device I gave to them. There's an update available, I'll put it off. Don't do that. There's no reason for you to be behind the crooks when you could in fact be ahead. And remember that most monthly patch updates that come out, they come out now when Apple doesn't say whether they're roughly monthly, but Apple is notorious for pushing them out secretively. They don't say they'll come out next Tuesday like Microsoft does, or next month on the second Tuesday as Microsoft's rule. Lots of other companies have a predictable schedule and then they put out updates in emergencies if needed. That's how Android does it, that's how Microsoft does it. Apple does it as and when. But the point is that as soon as those patches come out, if you go through the list of what got fixed, you'll almost always see in the list that some of the bugs are bugs that now the bugs are disclosed, not exactly how they work, but the fact that they exist. Some of them could be used by crooks to break in remotely. And as soon as those patches come out, even if the crooks hadn't figured them out in advance, which they probably hadn't, they're beavering away trying to figure out from what changed as a result of the patch. They're trying to figure out, wow, let's see if we can find the bug, because then it's easier to learn how to exploit it, because we don't have to do all the research work. We just get the bug given to us as a gift on the plate, if you like. And so generally what happens is after patches come out, that's when the crooks learn how to exploit them. And that means for everybody who's patched is ahead of the crooks, but everyone who's been a laggard, those crooks are coming to get you. So do remember that. I hope I haven't made that sound panicky. But the issue is that patch early, patch often. I know it sounds like a bit of a truism, like a bit of a mantra, like something we just say because we can. But it's really important, because why be behind the crooks when you can be ahead? And the same with your security software. You've got antivirus and a web filter. Make sure that it should keep itself up to date. For example, you've got Sophos Home, which you can use on Windows or Mac. It's free, or there's a 10-user version where a paid version where you can look after 10 members of your family from one console. It should update itself, but go and check just in case something has gone wrong. And if you think that you've set it into a particular security mode, if you think you're protecting yourself in a certain way, go and revisit those settings on a regular basis just in case something has gone wrong. The sixth tip from the article is that, and this is something that, this is not really a technological one. There's not a button you can press or a box you can tick. This is that it's important, if your kids haven't done any or much homeschooling before, and now they're stuck with doing it pretty much for every class that they do, you need to sit down and have a talk with them about privacy, so that they realise what they should and shouldn't do, and also so that they can learn when it's important to stick up for themselves and just to say no, or just to walk away, or just to turn the camera off, or whatever it is. And oh, I missed one actually. By the way, when it comes to passwords for older kids, you might want to show them that this is a video we made quite some years ago, but it gives you some handy tips on what to avoid in a proper password, and how you can make a really complicated password but create a sort of aid memoir that helps you to remember it easily. So older children might like that. It's a good bit of fun. It's only 2 minutes long and it's not too complicated. And So when it comes to privacy, you need to explain to your kids, what could go wrong. And this could be as simple as reminding them that if they are doing something like an online class, and presumably you'll be there and supervising, you'll be making sure that they're not, that they're only turning the camera's only on with the apps that it's supposed to be on. Teach them that it's okay. In fact, it's not just okay. It's important to think about things like what's in the background. What's displayed. Is there something on the wall that maybe identifies exactly where you live, or some personal information that, although it might not be directly dangerous if somebody else sees it, that it's kind of giving away something about your family identity, that if the crooks get enough little bits and pieces from an attack here, from a breach there, from something you said online that you didn't mean to, all of those things, they could put them together. And that it's okay to refuse to give information out if you're not comfortable with it. Never, ever feel pressurized. Like today I went into the bank and they said, we have to ask you this question. I thought, oh, it's a security thing. At the end of the transaction. And they said, it's about marketing. And they wanted to know if I wished to opt back into their marketing. Now they had me in person. And I said, no, what I want you to do is I want to tick the box that says, you won't ask me about marketing again. And they were quite aghast. No, we're just asking you. We have to. They don't have to ask me. They chose to ask me because it was in their interest to do so in case I wanted marketing again. And it's okay to say, no, I don't even want to answer that. I don't even want to answer that question, yes or no, because the answer I gave before will do. And we have a great article as well for the privacy tips that you can actually use on modern iOS and Android phones. That's a great article that, for older kids, you can actually show them that article and show them what modern operating systems are trying to do to protect their privacy. Because just learn, if Apple and Google, they're marketing companies, they're companies that want to sell you stuff. If they think it's a good idea not to track you under this circumstance or that circumstance, if they think it's a great idea to have certain times when your phone's off or your microphone's off, even in their own apps, if they think that, then it's kind of teaching you a lesson that maybe it's important to learn about these controls, not just that they exist, but why they exist. In other words, why we've reached that position in today's digital society. And the last point, I'm not going to dwell on this because we've spent enough time already, but while you're about it, because everybody's going to be online and you might have two kids online to different sites at the same time while you're trying to work, so it makes the supervision difficult, you're all sharing the same network, suddenly it's like, as a parent, you've become, if you like, the IT manager, the sysadmin, for actually what is effectively a complicated small business network, if you like to think about it. So tip number 7 is learn how to lock down your home Wi-Fi, your home network. Now, I'm not going to go into that. That's a sort of topic in its own right. We already have a Naked Security Live that you can watch about that. And that Naked Security Live, in turn, was based on this article. I think the video you can find in there. So that's the one to go and look at. If I can just get the title to come up. I don't know what I did last time with the contrast to get it to appear. Well, that's the icon you're looking for. If you want to know what to search for, I'll put the URLs in the show notes. Home Wi-Fi security tips, 5 things to check. So that's what you want to look for. And that gives you some simple things that you can do on your home network just to make sure that A, it's much less likely that crooks will get in and be able to snoop around on what you're doing, including perhaps what your children are doing, and B, that will stop you inadvertently revealing more to the world than you intended. And most home routers these days do have some decent security features in them, even if they're fairly entry-level routers. The problem is they're all different, and so in that article we've got some advice of how to go through the user interface in your home router to make sure that you're doing things right. So thanks for listening, folks. Let me just read out the 7 tips in bullet point form before we finish, so you know the things that you can do. And so this is more a kind of state of mind than a list of these are the buttons you should press. So here are the 7 tips again, how to make your homeschooling more secure. Firstly, first thing you need to think about, setting up device sharing. Don't let your children, if you've got more than one child, don't let them share accounts on the same device. If you have one device and the whole family has to use it, you can divide and conquer by setting up separate user accounts with separate passwords that have separate security and privacy configurations. That means that even if you're all looking out for each other, it stops you making mistakes which inadvertently harm the whole family by mistake. Tip number 2, you need to decide in advance on appropriate sites for your children depending on their age, and that's why, as I said, this is tip 2 after setting up separate accounts, because if you have separate accounts you can actually use the parental controls on your phone or the operating system that helps you configure the settings for each user differently. That means that you don't, if you've got an older kid who needs access to more stuff online to do research for homework, you don't have to restrict them to the same settings that you would use for a much younger child. The third issue, we talked about choosing appropriate apps, and again, parental controls can help you to do that. And we also advise sticking to the official stores. Don't try and, I can't find the right one, I'll go and get it from some alternative marketplace that someone has recommended. Tip number 4, you need to think about picking proper passwords. We say this every time, but most importantly, when it comes to accounts that are set up for your children by the school, make sure you change the passwords, because we have had cases where schools set all the kids to the same password. Terrible idea for your school, please don't do that. And you also have the problem if the password was chosen for you, you don't know whether it's just lying around on a list somewhere else where it could leak out. Tip number 5 is the good old patch early, patch often. Don't be behind the crooks when you could be ahead. There's just simply no reason. Don't put it off, do it today. Tip number 6 is sit down and have that talk about privacy with your children and take them through the settings on the device, particularly if they're older children. Show them the article that I recommended where you can go through, these are the privacy settings. Because those privacy settings I talked about, they didn't used to be in Apple's iOS or Google's Android. When mobile phones first came out, the privacy settings were fairly basic. They didn't have the level of control that they do now. And like I said, if Apple and Google have come to the party and said, you know what, we need to give people more control over this. If they think it's important, then you know that it is important, and you need to take that to heart as well. And the last tip is tip number 7: lock down your home Wi-Fi. We've got a great separate article and a separate Naked Security live video that will help you do that. Keep the bad stuff out and keep the good stuff in. So thanks for listening, everybody. If you're new to homeschooling but you're going to be forced to do it for weeks or months or however long, I wish you all the very best. It's not too hard to be much more secure than you were a day, a week or a month ago by taking a few fairly simple steps. So thanks for listening, and until next time, stay secure. I can't press the button.